Hello chess friends and welcome to Out of Chess channel and welcome back to the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour finals in 2021. We're already in the day 2 and we're following now the great match game between the two top grandmasters Magnus Carlsen and Mamedyarov. So this match game in the day 2 was really one of the wildest that I've seen now recently, because what really happened is really incredible. First of all, Mamedyarov managed to win the first game out of the 4 games that they have to play in the rapid time format. Then Magnus Carlsen managed to get the second win, and then in the third game again Mamedyarov took the lead, which meant that Magnus Carlsen had to win the game in order to force maybe the 2 additional games, and that's exactly what happened. Magnus Carlsen won the 4th game, then again Magnus Carlsen took the lead, and then Mamedyarov again equalized the results, which meant that they had to play the so-called Armageddon game. They had to play 7 games today, which was really incredible. All of the games that they have played were winning games, no draw, so it was, in my opinion, really one of the best chess events that I've followed now this year. So let's check out now the Armageddon game, in which Magnus Carlsen had to play with the white pieces. Magnus Carlsen had here 5 minutes on the clock. On the other hand, Mamedyarov has 4 minutes on the clock, but Mamedyarov of course needs only a draw. If that happens, then Magnus is losing the game. Let's check out now what happened. This is really brutal chess. Here Magnus Carlsen played with the white pieces, as I said, and opened with the move d4. Here Shakhriak's response was d5, c4, and after e6 we have now the queen's gambit decline, and after move knight to c3 we have now the so-called Janovsky variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. And recently I've started this Queen's Gambit decline series on my YouTube chess channel, from white and from black perspective. If you want to study the Queen's Gambit decline, here's the link to our whole series where we have studied many variations. Maybe you can also check them out. And in the continuation of the series we're covering for sure also the Janovsky variation. So the Janovsky variation is, I think, a tricky opening. It seems in the beginning that Black is playing a normal pawn move, it's nothing special going on, but actually this is a deep positional idea here by Black. First of all, if you're playing maybe a normal developing move here instead of c takes d5, if you're playing something like knight to f3, then of course d takes c4 will happen, and then in the continuation of the game this is the risk, because Black could maybe here connect these 3 pawns. In the continuation of the game you would be pretty much forced to play a very annoying move a4, but then in the continuation I think with c5 Black can equalize the game and has, I think, a decent position. Bishop to b4 is also a nice opportunity. Knight to c6 is also here a great idea here for Black. So as I said, Black has now really a great flexibility, and White has exposed himself a little bit and has also several weaknesses here. First of all, what we can notice, the b4 is a weak square, also the b3 square can be maybe used as an object of Black's attack. So that's why White likes to undermine the pressure here in the center with the move c takes d5, which is now the most often and most popular line that White is playing. Here after move c takes d5 we have e takes d5, and now again Black get challenged with 2 moves. Basically White can develop with the normal knight to f3, then Black will play probably knight to f6. If White now continues with the move bishop to f4 like Magnus Carlsen did, then many times after move knight to f6 and e3 Black is trying to undermine also the pressure a little bit by trading off the dark with bishops, because you have to bring, I think here from White's perspective, the dark square bishop out. If you don't do that, if you play maybe early something like e3, knight to f3, bishop to d3, okay, you're getting into a fast development, but the bishop on c1 could be then a bad piece, because it would be blocked out simply by its own pawn on e3. So that's why here after move bishop to f4 many times this scenario e3, and then Black is trying to trade off the dark square bishop, is trying to get rid of this very annoying bishop on f4. So here Magnus played maybe not the most popular line, but it's a tricky line also. Playing bishop to g5, it's he's staying with the bishops on the board. We have bishop to e6, which is also now a normal idea, because the bishop on e6 can be developed on this square, because there is no good way anymore to attack the light square bishop of Black's, because the g5 square is taken. If the knight on f3 comes, then of course you cannot attack anymore on g5 here the bishop on e6. So that's why the bishop on e6 can be developed like this, and now in the continuation Black hopes to have a decent setup with knight to d7 and simply develop all of the minor pieces, calcing, and maybe then break slowly the position with the move c5. So here in the continuation bishop to d3 played by Magnus, we have knight to d7, and now f4, because Many times in the static center setups, we have talked about static center setups in many of my videos, which what I mean about this is of course this pawn structure in the center. It's this d4 d5 setup, which means that we're searching for these squares on the board. White is trying to occupy of course the e5 square and also the c5 square, so it means we want to occupy the squares that are supported by the centralized pawns, because no dynamics can happen basically in the center. On the other hand, of course, black is trying also to occupy the c4 square but also the e4 square. So that's why Magnus' preparation is now f4 with ideas of knight to f3 and then simply to occupy the weak e5 square. So in the continuation we have h6, bishop to h4, and now g5. A risky choice here by Mamedyarov, because f5 is also was also the threat here by Magnus Carlsen, maybe to lock here the light square bishop. After move g5, f5 is not so good immediately. It leads now into a complicated line in which I think black is getting out of this tactical mess with a better position, because here in the continuation black should probably simply proceed with g takes h4, then after something like f takes e6, f takes e6, okay, you have your fun with one check, no problem with that. But now after move king to e7, the problems now after normal development with f3 here, rook to g8 will happen, or queen to g8 will simply attack further the position, and also the g2 now is a clear target, it's a clear object of black's attack. Although it seems so that the king on e7 is endangered, it's actually not so, because in the continuation, as I said, queen to g8, maybe rook to e8, and maybe king to d8 can be also played, maybe securing the king on the square like this. The engine, for instance, gives here already a +1 evaluation for black, which is really incredible. So that's why here after move g5, Magnus accepts the challenge, plays now f takes g5, didn't pass through here with the move f5. We have h takes g5, and now bishop to g5, and now the first really mistake here by Mamedyarov. This gambit line is perfectly fine, it's nothing wrong with this position, because obviously after queen to e7, black still can secure the king by castling queenside. Also Magnus, I think, has to castle queenside because there are simply too many open files on the king side, so castling into some open files I think would be suicide for any player here, black or white. Whoever castles on the king side I think will be destroyed, so that's why both players are basically preparing queenside castling. So that's why, okay, here Mamedyarov played the risky line, but he made now, I think, his first mistake. He played now simply c6, because here he can play, I think, the normal rook takes h2 and simply trade off the rooks after something like rook takes h2, here bishop to h2, and now white has to lose another tempo in order to protect the knight. Or here also cool opportunities maybe to play even bishop to g3, getting this check, and maybe prevent also here white from castling. So these are ideas, both of these ideas I think are good, but c6 is simply too passive, because now Magnus Carlsen is preparing queenside castle with the move queen to f3. We have now bishop to e7, knight to e2, and here queen to b6, queenside castling, and now again a mistake here by Mamedyarov. He's playing now the move c5, and that's what I meant in the middle of this video about the static center position. Whenever we have this pawn structure like this, d4 d5, okay, the only way to create dynamics here is to push pawns from white's perspective here with the move e4, or here from black's perspective with the move c5, but that's actually suicide, because when you're playing that, then these pawns in the center are simply left isolated. So that's why White's choice can be maybe in one occasion to play the move e4, but it's a risky choice, because as we said, the d4 could be an isolated pawn. So that's why also here this move by Shakria with the move c5 is a risky choice, because the d5 now becomes the main target of white. So here in the continuation, Magnus plays now a very tricky move, bishop to c2, because he doesn't want to get c4 where black is gaining maybe an extra tempo against the bishop. He retreats simply with the bishop, but the bishop hasn't lost its activity. Still this bishop can aim here on a4, and also can be very active on this diagonal, because if you play c4 now without the tempo, it's again not so good, because here you can develop your bishop on a4 castling, and here bishop to d7, bishop takes d7, bishop to f6, queen to f6, and you see now, because you pushed c5 now the d5 is simply long-term weakness. So the c6 move first and then the c5 move were, I think, the main mistakes now in Shakir Mamedyarov game. This wasn't the continuation, but I wanted to say show you one scenario what can happen around the square d5. You could simply lose the tactical battle. So here, after move bishop to c2, Shakir Mamedyarov castled, and now Magnus pulled off a very tricky move. This was, I think, a spooky move here by Magnus. He is inviting here Shakir Mamedyarov to play the spin, because when the knight was on e2, then of course bishop to g4 was a little bit cut off here by the knight on e2. But now with the move knight to f4 here, Magnus Carlsen is saying, okay, play your bishop to g4, but I've calculated some tactics, and that's exactly what happened. Many moves can be played here by black. Black can play king to b8, rook to g8, and similar stuff. The evaluation, the engine gives here already a +2 evaluation here for white, especially because of this isolated pawn. You see, after d takes c5, we can even continue the pressure around the square d5. All of these pieces are simply attacking this this weakness. Simply, we have to say it's a long-term weakness. All of these pieces are simply attacking this weak pawn. So that's why here Shakir Mamedyarov hoped maybe for the best, tried now the move bishop to g4, but Magnus Carlsen calculated this tactic very well. He played now knight takes d5, comes also with a direct attack against the queen. Here Shakir takes, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, queen bishop takes f3, knight takes b6 comes of course with a check. We have knight takes b6, bishop to e7, everything is pretty much forced. Here Shakir Mamedyarov took, bishop takes d1, but now after move bishop to f5, that was part of Magnus Carlsen calculations. Here in this position Shakir Mamedyarov resigned. What's the tricky part? Of course, if you're getting out of this mess, then we simply take out first the rook with the check, and then we take out the bishop. If you try something like rook to d7 in order to cover yourself, we can play actually rook to d1. We can even leave this pawn on h2 unprotected, because d takes c5 is opening again the d file, and you see now the knight is hanging, the knight has to move. You cannot move the rook, and in the next move you simply lose also the rook on d7. So really wild stuff, incredible tactics that Magnus Carlsen calculated here in such a fast time format. If you put now the PGN into the new Stockfish engine at home, it will show you that here Magnus pulled off really a brilliancy without inaccuracies, mistakes or blunders. He basically waited for Shakir Mamedyarov mistakes, but he also tricked him, I think, a little bit, inviting him to play the move bishop to g4, and you see now Shakir Mamedyarov c6, c5 were, I think, risky moves, and here Mamedyarov got punished, and Magnus Carlsen won eventually this Armageddon game. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting stuff in the Janovsky variation. As I said, if you want to see and study more of the Queen's Gambit Decline, here's my link to the whole series. We have started recently this Queen's Gambit Decline series with some great games for white and for black. And if you want to see our previous analysis of some games of this tournament, check out my video here. Here's also the link of the game that we have analyzed before. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.